Welcome to the panel that we are holding here with the title Construction and the Climate Crisis, Taking the Next Steps. My name is Esther from Open House Basel, and we are presenting this panel together with Open House Zurich. We are very proud to be part of the very first Open House Worldwide Festival, and a huge thank to the whole team that makes this festival happen. A special thank also to the ZHDK, the University of Art and Design here in Zurich. Thank you for having us here, and thank you that you're hosting this event. We also want to thank Janssen, one of our sponsoring partners. Janssen is a tradition-rich Swiss company that develops and manufactures precision steel tube and steel systems. Well, in this hour, we will first see the city trailer of Open House Zurich, just to get in touch with the city where we are located right now. And afterwards, I will give the word to Yuma Shinohara. He will introduce the panel guests and lead through the conversation. He is curator at the Swiss Architectural Museum in Basel, and he is editor working in the field of architecture and urbanism. I'm very excited to hear from the participants here around me how they approach the shift to a climate-neutral built environment. And I'm looking forward to join this discussion about the next steps that we have to take. So stay tuned, and we will see the trailer of Open House Zurich now. Don't forget that you can put your comments and your questions in the live chat, or the visitors that are here, you can come and to me, and you can give me your questions if you have some, and we will introduce them to the panel later on. So enjoy.
All right. Hello, everybody. My name is Yuma Shinohara, and I'm assistant curator at the Swiss Architecture Museum in Basel. Thank you very much, Esther, for the lovely introduction. And I'm very happy to be able to moderate today's panel on construction and the climate crisis. It's a big topic, since I think that for many of us working with architecture in the built environment, it's become by now clear just how big of an impact our professional activities have on the current climate crisis. Buildings and construction, according to certain estimates, account for nearly 40% of energy-related carbon dioxide emissions, while also having a significant impact on biodiversity loss. So if we want to make a major dent in carbon emissions globally, the construction industry is a good place to start. At the same time, though, architecture and the construction industry are also notoriously resistant to change due to timescales, as well as the complex negotiations between different parties involved. Current social concerns and phenomena manifest themselves in the built environment with a very significant time lag, if at all. At the same time, though, the current climate emergency leaves little time to wait. Experts warn that the world has until the year 2030, so 10 years from now, to make a significant dent in greenhouse gas emissions, or else face irreversible changes in biodiversity, as well as compounding crises. So faced with this urgency, I think the question we all should be asking ourselves is what is construction and everyone involved with it to do? What are some actionable steps that we can take right here and right now to make a tangible effect on our carbon emissions? So today I look forward to discussing these and similar questions with a panel of 4 experts, all of whom are involved in pushing for climate neutral construction practice, but also approaching this issue from various perspectives. We have 3 guests here in our studio in Zurich, as well as 1 guest calling in from Vienna. I will start with introducing our guest kind of farthest from me, at the very edge of the podium here, Annika Seifert. Annika Seifert is a lecturer in architecture at the University of Applied Sciences in Lucerne, where she heads the specialization course on architecture and energy. Following studies in architecture at the ETH Zurich and experience working in architecture offices in Switzerland, Annika moved to Tanzania in 2010, where she co-founded the architecture office APC. In 2012, she co-founded the Dar es Salaam Center for Cultural Heritage, which she led until 2005. She's the author of multiple articles and books, including in 2012, Hitze-Architektur, which translates roughly to heat architecture, learning from African modernism. So thank you that you can be here, Annika, today. The second guest I'd like to introduce is Stefan Sattler, who is calling in from Vienna. I hope there he is. Hi, Stefan. Stefan Sattler is a renewable energy planner working for the city of Vienna, where he focuses on fields such as photovoltaic energy production and roof greening. He holds an engineering degree as well as a doctorate from the University of Natural Resources and Life Sciences in Vienna, where he also works as a lecturer. Stefan is also part of the editorial team for the journal Immofocus and is a co-organizer of the Illmitzer-Gespräche, which is a conference on sustainable building practices taking place in Illmitz, Austria. Going on to our next guest here, Nyanli Landru is a materials scientist and co-founder of the ETH spin-off Oxara, which develops cement-free concrete made from clay-based excavation material. Following master's degrees at the EPF Lausanne and the University of Limoges, Nyanli received his doctorate in 2018 from the ETH Zurich, where he conducted research at the Chair for Sustainable Construction on technology that would eventually form the basis for Oxara. In 2019, he was named one of Europe's 30 under 30 in science and healthcare by Forbes magazine. Very cool. And then finally, we have here Claudio Meletta, who is an architect and partner in the office of Stereo Architektur in Basel and Zurich, which he co-founded in 2014. Claudio holds a bachelor's degree in architecture from the EPF Lausanne and a master's in architecture from the ETH Zurich. He has also worked in offices such as UN Studio and MVRDV in the Netherlands, as well as Matei Manaila in Zurich. In 2019, he co-founded the collective Countdown 2030, which is a group of architects who are working to raise awareness among planners and architects of the impact of their professional activity on climate change. So, like the climate emergency, we don't have that much time today. We only have an hour, unfortunately, so I suggest we'll just jump right in. The way we'll do it is like this. First, we've asked each of the participants to prepare a short 5-minute presentation introducing their work, which will then be followed by an open discussion. And as Esther also mentioned, the comments are open, or our DMs are open, I guess. So if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to write them in the comment section. So I guess we'll start with the presentations. The first, I'd like to ask perhaps Annika to start things off.
Is the mic working? Yep. Yes, perfect. Thank you very much, Yuma, for your kind invitation and introduction, both. I'm going to talk, hopefully very briefly, about how I understand energy-related architectural design. Is this okay? As Yuma already said, I'm a lecturer in Lucerne. I teach architecture in the master's program, and I'm also a practicing architect myself. Our office in Dar es Salaam, which we have been operating for about 10 years now with my partner Gunter Klicks and partners in Tanzania. We have, since 2010, practiced in a very playful approach, let's say, energy or climate-related architectural design. But I don't want to talk about this so much today, but I'd rather talk about what we do at the university, because this is very closely related to how we work in the office. And I'm maybe only going to say one thing about our office work, and that is when we started 10 years ago, it was a very, I would say, playful and joyful approach. We didn't feel this, the title of today's talk, which you gave us, It's Urgent. We didn't feel it that much at that point 10 years ago. It was really an inspired approach that started from this research that we had been conducting about Hitza architecture, learning from tropical modernism in independent Africa, East Africa. And from that, we started our own design practice. And then things seemed to become more urgent and the discourse became more urgent. And then we were called sort of back to Switzerland and to the university, and have since then been trying to bring this very, let's say, joyful or playful approach back to the to this urgent discourse with us. The course I teach at university is called Architecture and Energy, and I would like to explain very briefly how we understand this term of energy. There's 3 aspects of energy which we typically talk about, and we always try to focus on one of these per design task, which breaks it down for the students and makes it much easier for them to actually approach this somewhat daunting big topic of sustainability. So the aspects of energy which we have sort of developed over time, both in the office and at university, is the question of resources, which translates into embodied energy, grey energy. The aspect of use, which is the operating energy, I think something that Switzerland and much of Central Europe has been focusing on in the past 10, even 15 years. And the third one is the climate, which you call the ambient energy. So to say what's already there, what can and probably should influence how we design. Just as a little illustration, I'm showing 3 student projects to illustrate what this means. This is from a semester where we focused on embodied energy, grey energy. In this case, students were asked to deal with an existing structure, as you can see in the top axonometry. That's an existing schoolhouse in the city of Lucerne, very close to our school, which is a polluted building. It's needed renovation. It was also a protected building, a heritage or a protected construction. But from the looks of it, it proved to be very difficult to actually renovate it and refurbish it because it contained several poisonous substances due to its the period when it was constructed in the 70s. And it was unclear to the city whether they were actually going to renovate it or whether they would have to demolish it. So this is a question we posed to our students, and they responded very differently. And this is just one example where a student, as you might be able to see from the bottom axonometry, actually suggested to turn these three existing or treat these three existing pavilions of the school very differently. He basically reduced one of the pavilions to its basic structure, a steel and concrete structure, almost like an artificial ruin. This is also what the rendering shows on top, where you see this green garden that grows in there. He was able to accommodate many of the planned functions for a community center in this half outdoor space. And then he just reduced the size of the middle building and placed all the actual, in this very compact building, he placed all the actual core functions which needed a warm insulated space in there. And then he used the materials which he had gained from reducing the other two buildings to build a very large, very cheap, very simple hall, which then serves for different purposes like markets and sports functions, etc. Students were also required to do calculations in that course, and that was, I think, very, very interesting for them in terms of learning how their design choices influence the energy balance of their projects. This is another example for operating energy. We talked about water as a resource in this semester. The task that was given to the students was building a university building in a township in Cape Town. So they were faced with this ongoing topic of the Cape Town water crisis. And the project that you see shows this very low-tech but very poetic proposal of a condensation dome that is made from scrap pieces, a translucent dome that shelters the core functions of the program underneath this large dome that also becomes a landmark for this very sort of vast township, and manages to condensate water just through the energy of the sun that hits this dome and turns the mud that collects in this stormwater drain that we see underneath this elevated structure into drinkable, very, very clean condensated water. The third one, climate, another example from a student project, New Gorna, UNESCO World Heritage Hassan Fatih planned village in Upper Egypt, where the obvious topic was the immense heat during the day, the drastic temperature changes between day and night. And the student chose to work with the materials for obvious reasons. These clay-built Hassan Fatih structures were a topic, but most importantly, he experimented with measures that allow him to create a cool, pleasant interior by managing the temperature difference between day and night and finding ways to conserve the cool in these interior courtyards that can then serve the users throughout the day. So these are the three different energy aspects. As you can see, they are all approached in a very architectural way. The students then sort of put together in this logic of resources, use climate, sort of a logic, which factors do they deal with, which architecture strategies do they apply. But most importantly, what you don't see in this logic, but you might be able to gather from what I'm trying to show, is that the overriding let's say, the mainspring, the raison d'être for this whole undertaking is, of course, the users, which then interact with the building, who the buildings serve, and who use the buildings. And I think this is a very important factor, and we place a very strong, we highlight that in our design tasks very strongly, because I think maybe we can talk about that a little later. That's maybe one of the major questions of why such projects or approaches may or may not work. Thank you.
Thank you, Annika. For our next presentation, I'd like to ask Stefan to... Yes, we're...
Our building stock, our existing building stock, and what we can do with our new buildings. I was asked to tell you about what I do in my daily job and how we are preparing our buildings to be climate neutral and how we make them future-proof. Cities, of course, are very important to tackle climate change. They just cover about 2% of our Earth's surface area, but in the meantime, more than 50% of the world's population is living in those cities. And the people or the complete cities are, they produce more than 75% of our CO2 emission currently. So that's quite a lot. That means if we want to fulfill our climate goals, we have to start with our cities if we want to have some chance. Therefore, we have to use the resources, the renewable resources, which are inside our cities. Basically, the resources are those four, which you can see here, is the deep geothermal energy, which will be integrated in our district heating network. We have the shallow geothermal energy source, which can be used for heating and cooling individual buildings. We have the waste energy on the lower right side of the picture. It is important to use the energy which would otherwise go back to the environment and heat up our cities during summer even more, to use this energy for some other use cases. And of course, solar energy is the fourth renewable energy source in our cities, and we have to implement it in very creative way so that we not only can produce energy on an area, but also make a green roof out of it, make a livable space out of it, so we can use our limited free areas in the city very smart, I guess would be the right word. In Vienna, we have climate protection areas. Sorry, this graph is in German, but I think you can imagine what it means. In those areas, you only can use for heating and warm water for your building renewable energy sources or district heating. You are not allowed to use fossil energy for those purposes. So they are completely fossil free, those areas. Currently, we have 4 districts, but in the next 2 years, the complete city will be covered with those areas. They just are important for our new buildings. In the future, of course, we also have to think about how we can integrate the existing buildings in those climate protection areas. But that has to be done in the following years, I guess. Therefore, the building stock will be very important because most of our cities are already built, and therefore we have to find solutions how we can decarbonize our existing buildings. In Vienna, we have more than 4,000 apartments with gas heating, with gas boilers. We will connect a lot of them to the district heating network. A lot of them will use heat pumps, and a small amount of those buildings will be we will use green gas, but green gas, of course, will be used in other areas more efficiently, like energy producing plants, power plants, maybe in the of course for the industry, and buildings are not the first priority for using green gas. Because cities are so limited, we have to work together with our regions. We have to import green electricity and green gas in the future because the city's area is just too small to produce enough energy right inside of our cities. Currently, we are importing fossil fuels from all over the world, so that has to change. One showcase project from Vienna, it's the Lucerne 22. It's an apartment building which energy comes from the soil. It uses geothermal energy, and it also uses wind energy for powering the heat pumps. The windmills, of course, are not located in Vienna. They're on the outskirts of Vienna or in Lower Austria. And if the windmills produce too much energy so that the market price would be negative, the heat pumps are running and producing warm water and room heat. So we are storing our heat, our renewable energy in the building concrete. Concrete is a very effective, you can say, battery system for storing renewable energy. So that's it. You have some impressions from Vienna above, and on the left side you can find our energy header, where you can find a lot of showcase projects from Vienna and have a look on them. Thank you very much.
Small insight into your work. I'd like to ask Nyanli Landru to give his presentation next.
So, thank you very much for inviting me. And today I will talk about Oxara, our startup, which means also community. And the vision that we have is how do we provide material solution for sustainable and affordable housing. And before, I would like to talk to you about the hidden part of building a house. So we all know that we need gravel, sand, cement, and water to produce our concrete that will be delivered on the construction site. What we often forget is that during this process, there's millions of tons of excavation material that is landfilled. Non-used resources that is locally available. In Switzerland, this represents around 76% of construction waste. Almost 35 million tons of excavation material landfilled each year. And worldwide, we are talking about more than 1 billion tons of excavation material. So what are we trying to do with Oxara? To turn this construction waste into valuable construction resources to promote circular economy in the construction industry. How does it work? So here I have a small video that shows our process. Basically, we take the waste, we add water, and we add our technical solution, which is our mineral additive. We mix everything in a normal concrete mixer for the time being, for the material to homogenize, and then with hand or with similar construction processes, you can have a fluid mix, you can vibrate it, put it in a formwork, and 2-3 days or 1 day, depending on the volume of the wall, demold it. Therefore, you have a material which has self-supporting load capacity you can use for non-structural application and for low-rise building, 2-3-story house, for instance. So this was the outcome of my PhD, basically. And since then, what happened is that we try to produce at a bigger scale. And doing also the life cycle assessment, we realized that we can reduce up to 90% CO2 compared to normal concrete. So here we have a first cement-free concrete technology. We have also done other different tests. How can we use the material for floor application, for instance? And here we work in collaboration with In Situ Baubureau Architecture here in Zurich to make this floor solution that is cast on a corrugated sheet. At the end, you can put either like a stone plate or leave it completely open. Another approach that we look into is how do you optimize material in your floor element. Then we work with a block research group at ETH, where we try to create like funicular floor for using low performance material. And everything is afterwards like a pre-stressed with this metallic wire, as you can see on the picture. Another big scale test we did this year with Swiss recycling company and construction company is this wall that we cast on a Friday and demold on a Monday, so 2 days in a mold. And it was up to 2.5, 2.6 meter high, 25 centimeter, had the fluidity as a normal concrete. So this proved that it's possible to use this material for non-structural application. Another example is how can we integrate it with reinforcement, for instance. And here we work with Grammature and Color department at ETH and some students where we did a clean-crete mesh mold. The mesh here play a role of reinforcement, but also of a formwork. Now our next step is we want to design or build this small pavilion coming in December, and hopefully we can share the outcome with you guys. So what we are trying to share is that our material, not only ours, but their solution that could fit both worlds, the South and the West. And as you can see on this picture, which represents Johannesburg, you can see that in one part where there is concrete, you need sustainable technologies. In the part where you cannot afford concrete, you need affordable product. And who are we exactly? We are Oxara, and we are trying to redefine the construction industry, build a way towards sustainable, affordable housing to all, but also build a sustainable ecosystem with the different stakeholders. I have mapped here the current stakeholders, how they are dispersed, and we hope with Oxara we can bring them all together and create a really strong ecosystem. I would like to thank you very much and share this last word from Nelson Mandela. After climbing a great wall, there's only ways and challenges that come ahead. And this is really, really what is driving us. We haven't found a perfect solution, but we are always working on it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nyanli. All right, finally, I'd like to call Claudio Mileta to the podium.
Okay, thank you. So I am of Countdown 2030, and Yuma already said most about us in the beginning of the introduction, but I'll tell you a couple of words anyway. We are a group of people that came together at the end of last year, and we were talking about how it can be that the building environment here in Switzerland at the architectural discourse doesn't really talk a lot about sustainable architecture, or when they do, it's just a side note often, and especially about carbon emissions. And as you said before, by 2030, we should have our building park emission-free. And so the first thing we did is we put up this countdown that shows us how much time is left until 2030, just to raise the awareness that this is actually an urgent and important topic. It first hung at the Architecture Museum and the Kunsthalle in Basel, and it is the idea that it goes around Switzerland until 2030, until it's not necessary anymore, hopefully. And right at this moment, it's at the Hochparterre shop in Zurich. Next picture. We started off as a little group of about 15 people, and right now we are up to about 40 active members. Here you can see a few of us, very engaged and just working in we're all architects or similar in the architecture field working people, and this is just like a side project for us. We're working on a lot of different projects right now. They all have in common that we want to raise the awareness of architects and people who are involved with building about the urge to change the way we build. And also providing them with some sort of information on how we could do that. As you can see, we have exhibitions planned. For example, there will be one here in Zurich in the beginning of next year at the ZATS. We have a podcast coming up. We have action days that we want to do. But maybe one of the biggest project that we're working on at the moment is our search for the biggest levers. The measures that we can give architects to work with and to change their impact on the environment. We are inspired by this card that we found. It's a card from Germany, from the Initiative Psychologie im Umweltschutz. It shows us as individuals how much we can reduce our carbon footprint with certain measures. For example, if we stop flying or if we reduce our living area to under 30 square meters, or you also have in a very small part the coffee to go cup. And it shows you about the impact of each measure compared to the other measures, like the weight they have. And we tried to do something similar for the construction industry, or for the architects and the planners involved, and wanted to make such postcards as well for our industry, because we think that the awareness for individuals in their private life at the moment is quite, everybody understands now that we should contribute to reducing the carbon emissions, and that it's no good to fly, and we understand that. But I don't think that most people involved in building structures are understand their impact in their everyday life when they're working. And our postcards are not finished yet. We're working on them. We can release them hopefully soon. I can show you a draft here. We talk to experts, and what we do, or what we understand our work in, is like some kind of translation work, because there's a lot of knowledge around on how we could build more environmental friendly and strengthen the biodiversity and everything, but we are not aware of it. And we wanted to make this information easily accessible for architects and other people who are involved with building. And what we did is made these 3 cards. This is one of that project. One on the scale of cities, one on the scale of buildings, and one on the scale of details or building materials. And the idea is that in any stage that a planner is working on, he can take the corresponding card and look up what are the biggest levers or the biggest measures that they can have or use to reduce those emissions and to strengthen the biodiversity. We, inspired by the card we saw before, we also have like different sizes of those measures. The biggest ones being the most important ones. The other ones also being important, should attack as many positions as you can. But this gives you kind of a feeling on the relation of these things. This is work in progress. We want to release it. We want to talk about it in public, a project of ours. And we are also happy to change them if we see that there is some information in them which isn't accurate, or if it changes within the process of this work. That's it for now from me. I'm looking forward to discussion.
Great. Thank you, Claudio. Yeah, no, it's really inspiring to hear about all of your different initiatives and how you're also kind of working within your respective fields, how to kind of tackle this topic of climate neutral construction practice. I just want to maybe start by taking or zooming out a little bit and maybe taking a kind of general inventory of, let's say, the status of sustainable construction today, because one of the things that one of the questions that I was thinking about while preparing for this talk was of course the topic of sustainability in construction is nothing new, right? It's honestly, it's a topic that we've been talking about for at least maybe 50 years. And maybe it's a bit of a kind of a naive question, but like, why is it that we haven't figured it out yet? Like, we've been talking about this for almost half a century now. What continue to be the obstacle towards kind of, let's say, a more universal understanding of what sustainable construction is and how we can actually, kind of act within construction practice to let's say, to minimize our impact on the environment. I would like to actually ask all of you to maybe say something, perhaps maybe with reference to the fields in which you're working in particular. I don't know if perhaps Stefan, if you'd like to start.
Yeah, of course. I think using not only renewable energy, but renewable materials and circular and integrate circular economy in our building process is very important. And it will be, I think, the next big thing in city planning and in our society. We in Vienna have the goal that in the year 2050, 80% of our used building materials are reusable or recyclable, and therefore we have to start right now. And currently we are starting our do-tank circular cities 2030. So we are focusing how we can make it the new standard that our buildings are circular economy ready, and so that they're built in a way that at the end of the lifetime for them, we can reuse the materials for new buildings, for maybe for something else. But we are not allowed in the year 2050 and afterwards that we just demolish our buildings like we do it today and store the materials on some dumping place outside of our cities. Those are the resources which are very critical. We don't have enough of, we have not unlimited resources for most of our building materials, and therefore we have to change the building code. We have to raise the awareness in our society that the used materials are a rare good. And legislation has to change, and I think in the next years it's an important job to do for us to change our building code, and it will be mandatory to plan in a way that the building can be rebuilt in 200 years. Because if we are talking about embedded energy, you can reduce the embedded energy mostly by expanding the lifetime of the building. So that's the main focus, I guess. Our buildings, which we are building today, have to stand there for at least 100 years. So that's kind of important task for us.
In terms of municipal policy, it remains kind of the let's say the inertia of building codes and kind of these legal standards that have been established in previous decades that kind of still remains an obstacle. Have I understand that correctly?
Yes, maybe there are some obstacles in the existing building code, but I think mainly it is missing in our building codes. We have to integrate it in them so that the planners, the architects are using those tools in an efficient way, so the buildings get more circular economy ready.
Annika, did you want to say something?
Yes, I think I can. Or what I would like to say ties right in there. What you are pointing out now is basically the question: why have regulations or certifications and building requirements? Why have they not caught up
And that is obviously a necessary and good question. I mean, I remember from my early childhood in the 80s, sustainability was a big topic, and then it just went away and nobody talked about it until the whole problem had multiplied and expanded to become not just an energy crisis, but a climate crisis and a biodiversity crisis, etc. But I would like to maybe address your question from an architect's perspective, and that is, we architects, we don't normally wait for requirements or for people to tell us what to do or which zeitgeist to pick up and work with. So I don't think that the sort of public opinion or major formal requirements or lack thereof are a good excuse for us not dealing with these topics. And the question is, why do we as architects not address these topics? Why do we shy away from that? And I think this is also the question which you address as Countdown 2030, right? Because there is so much knowledge, there is so much technology, there are people like Nyanli who actually have solutions. Why do we not jump to tackle them? Why have we not learned since the 70s? And I think there's maybe two explanations, possible explanations. One has to do with the actual users and how accepting they are of solutions that have been proposed. And I think that is in the 80s, sort of this early eco architecture has never been really attractive to users. And maybe that is because it approached the topic really more from a technical point of view. And that did not really speak to people, I suppose. And that was a major mistake, which maybe we can overcome. And then the other aspect, as I said, from the architect's perspective, might be a bit humorous, but architects, we like to design, we like to practice our creative possibilities, etc. And that is something that this maybe this eco architecture of the 80s does not really allow for very much, and also this approach that is very much focused on operating energy and building technology and mechanic ventilation and building insulation is not very inspiring to how we design buildings. So I think that we have to understand as a profession that there is a promise of potential for design, for like maybe a completely new design language or new design possibilities. And this might sound a bit weird because I'm basically saying you have to amuse the architects to make them, jump on the bandwagon. But architects are often resourceful people with good ideas. So I think it's worth also looking at it from that perspective.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. Thank you, Claudio. So I wonder. So is this also a messaging problem? I wonder.
Yes,
and like,
is
it a problem of, well, at least from the architecture perspective, like, is the main hurdle kind of the question of how to make sustainability sexy in a sense?
Also, I think there's so many levels or so many different aspects why we aren't further than we should, as far as we should be. And I think one of them is what you just talked about, is that it was kind of a niche for a long time to build ecologically, and it wasn't a very, well, of course, with some exceptions, it wasn't a very sexy, as you say, niche. And architects have a certain style they learned at university, and they want to, that they think they can play with. And this is a whole new area that you could play with. So, and I think people have to get used to the fact that this could be a sexy topic. Like we talk about reinventing the modernism in Countdown 2030, saying they had an idea or a vision then, and the form followed, But then, of course, there's also technical problems, as we said before, regulations. If you look at a certain project that you want to make and you want to make it environmental friendly, often the regulations and norms and conventions that we have don't allow to do certain things. But this can change quite quickly, I think. If you look at the corona problem, we can change those things. And then there's also this big topic of money and security. And
I think that a lot of people who are building as a client, they put a lot of money into a building, and they often, or that's what I realize when I work, they often look for something that has been improved and something that has been built 200 times, because they don't want to risk anything with the money. And it takes a lot of convincing of someone who spends money, a lot of money on a project, for him to do it or her to do it differently for once. And I think this process is starting now, but it still takes a lot of convincing work, because there's a lot of people, if I look at my fellow architects who just build the way we always build. And maybe just something that also comes to my mind is the role of the architect when you say the role, the way we understand our role at the moment, or a lot of architects understand their role now, is that they get a certain program or a certain made decision from a client, and then they just develop something which is nice within those rules, and you don't really have a big impact. But if you think your role a bit bigger, and you start also consulting clients maybe in an earlier phase, and you start talking to clients about these issues, then you can actually you can do something. I think you shouldn't underestimate your power.
Yanni, what's your take on this from a material science perspective?
Thank you. I think all the points are valid. I would go to the basics, which is like we haven't changed. Yeah. Like our mindset haven't changed. Like we are, and it's for different reasons. One is the material that we are accustomed to currently, concrete, steel, or like bricks, for instance. If I take the case of concrete, like the reason why it's widely spread is like it's easy to use. Everyone can build with concrete. However, all those vernacular technologies that have proven that you can build with, you need specific knowledge. So we don't want to spend the time in getting those specific knowledge anymore. Therefore, we get used to mixing like cement, gravel, and sand and producing concrete. The second aspect is, as you mentioned, is the role of the architect needs to be much wider than just designing, planning, and giving everything to the construction company to be done. So that's what we are trying to do now. We are bringing a technology that has similar like processing as concrete. Therefore, it means that you can build faster. But because we don't have certification, we need to convince not only the architect, but also the owner, the construction company, the recycling company. We put them all together on a table to say, here's the technology for sustainable construction. Do you want to use it? And we share with them like the value they can get out of all these aspects. So the technology by itself is almost around there, but we need ourselves to have a different approach toward it. Not see it as kind of a burden, but an opportunity to explore more creative paths, basically.
Thank you. Just a quick note, because I also received the signal that our hour is almost up. I believe the live stream has to move. Oh, we have 5 minutes more. Yeah.
And afterwards, we can, if you are okay, we could continue 15 minutes with this camera that takes it just to having a good discussion.
Yes.
Finishing it.
Okay, great. So we have 5 minutes more. The live stream will switch over in 5 minutes, but we will be able to continue the discussion, which will also be recorded for later viewing. So just wanted to say this. Yes, so very, very interesting. And I also wanted to, actually that leads me to a second question, actually. Because what I found also very, very interesting also in your presentation and in your effort is your, you are kind of working as a firm developing a certain kind of materials technology, but you have a much larger vision, right? I think it's not just about kind of developing this material, but really, we have this vision of kind of developing housing, developing affordable housing, and kind of, as you said, bringing various different parties to the table. my second question, I think, my question actually has to relate to, I think, with coalition building, because I think, this is like a very good situation where we have, people from working at different levels in sustainable construction are coming together. How can we actually use that and build these bridges in a more productive sense? Or how can we build these coalitions between, let's say, architects and municipal planners and material scientists? What needs to be done, do you think? What efforts are you doing in order to kind of build these bridges?
That's a really good question and tricky one, I would say. You building a house, or the landlord, the owner, he needs to understand that the house is not just something that he will rent out. He needs to think about who will be living in, or as if he will be the one living in. If we consider the COVID case, where we are now stuck to be inside, your indoor become kind of like a secret place where you need to have healthy environment, clean environment, but also where you can use it as a museum or whatever, like a cinema and so on. So if we think of it as an element where we are spending our time, and I believe that if it's the case, you will try to be as sustainable as possible, but not for someone else to come and live in. We might change our mindset. Therefore, to trickle down from the owner to the one designing the material, we need to have this sense of feeling that it's all belong to us, basically. So how do we create that? We are trying a different approach. So you need to talk to the different stakeholders, or share the message differently from what they are interested in. You need to get to understand what is their point, their pain point, and try to answer it with your technology. And that's what we are trying to do.
Thank you.
It's basically about empathy, you're saying?
Yes. Yeah.
It's about empathetic planning, maybe, or empathetic developing. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Interesting. I find that a very interesting notion. Maybe also, I think what your question could lead to is also, a topic that we talk about a lot as architects, of course, that of interdisciplinarity. It's not just the different consortiums, but also within the planning process, the different stakeholders involved. And of course, that is a major issue, because the time where the architect generalist could sort of supervise everything and know everything are simply over. As much as it might pain some people, we cannot sit in our ivory tower and sketch on napkins and solve world problems. It is not possible anymore. And I think in that type of communication that we have to seek with other planners and with people who have knowledge that we do not even know about, or maybe people we do not know about who have knowledge we have no idea that exists. And that also requires empathy in a way, I think, and definitely a kind of openness.
Yeah, empathy. Okay, well, let's just continue. No, because I think we're on a very interesting topic right now with this idea of kind of empathetic, and how do you kind of approach, let's say, different, or how do you inhabit different disciplines even while kind of being situated in one discipline? And I think I don't know, Claudia, did you want to say something about that?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's similar direction. I think it's a lot about communication, and what we're trying to do with Countdown is to mobilize as many people to want to deal with these kind of topics. You don't only need the architects, but also clients and everyone to do that. And then we need to talk about these topics. And for example, I think it's very important, for example, also to have the future users of a building early on in the process on a project, because then you can talk with them what they actually need and what they don't need, talk about sufficiency, talk about using existing structures or whatever there is on the table, and go on from there. And I think now we have, for example, some models of how buildings are constructed which are not at all good for that kind of development. For example, if you take at the
this model of a TU, like a total general kind of company, contractor, who builds it all for you. And architects and everyone who is involved with the project don't even talk to the client because there is a barrier between you. And that way you can never, convince anyone to do something new. And so it's about these structures and about communication, I think.
Stefan, if you're still there. I'd also like to ask this question also for you, kind of from the let's say the municipal point of view, because often of course sometimes, let's say, well maybe this is kind of a provocation if I say this, but like sometimes the let's say the relationship between architects, people who are building, and the municipality can sometimes be strained, right? Like sometimes architects might see the municipality as something that kind of blocks or kind of, certainly, let's say, regulates kind of how things need to be built. How have you experienced, let's say, kind of the communication with other architects who are also interested in, building sustainably? And how do you kind of build these bridges? Das ist nicht mehr da. Oh. Okay. Oh, schade. Yeah, so unfortunately, Stefan, I think, has also left the building, but too bad, because I was very interested to hear also his perspective. Yeah, but yeah, I did. Okay, well, then maybe we can go into maybe a pivot to a little bit of a different question. I think it also relates to this idea of interdisciplinarity and kind of working between disciplines. But I wanted to kind of lead into this question by kind of presenting perhaps a kind of an opposite position that maybe some architects or some professionals might also have. And I'm referring in particular to an open letter that was published around a month ago in Domus. I don't know if everyone's aware of this, by none other than Jacques Herzog. And it was an open letter addressed to David Chipperfield. David Chipperfield had asked the question, what can architects do to combat climate change, among other, social let's say, emergencies currently. And basically, Jacques Herzog writes, "Dear David, you asked this question, what can architects do to combat climate change? The answer is, David, nothing." And starts out in this provocative sense. Of course, the text ends up covering a lot of territory, ends up being a little bit more nuanced maybe than this first paragraph. But the main argument that he wants to make is that architects or any actor kind of involved in this very, very complex system of building, because of these interdependencies and because of their embeddedness in this kind of large system, his argument is that any individual actor within the system does not have the ability to change the system, and that it shouldn't be the responsibility of any individual actor in the system to change things. So he says that we shouldn't be wasting our energy in trying to change society when we can't do that anyway. What we should be concentrating on should be to do what we do best, right? In terms of architecture, to build buildings that reflect or kind of accommodate the needs of the users the best. Of course, very provocative statement, but I think it does raise an interesting question of agency, right? Or kind of, let's say, given limited resources, limited time. Of course, all of you professionals, you're also, working, you're doing 100 different things at once, and you have of course, there's always limited resources, right? Like, given these limited resources, how do you define a field of intervention where you can most effectively intervene, right? So I think maybe a little bit abstract, but I think a more concrete question, perhaps, for Claudia, for example. Could it be that architects can contribute most to combating climate change by continuing to be architects? Or do you think that, in a sense, the climate emergency necessitates not just architects, but any other professionals working in the construction industry to kind of step out of their comfort zone, to kind of take on new roles.
Okay, this is difficult. We discussed that later within Countdown 2030 quite controversially because, of course, a lot of it thought it was, something outrageous that he said, but in the same time, I understand where he's coming from. You say within your role as an architect, you do, the way we know Herzog, they always work on every project very intensely, and I'm pretty sure that they don't work exactly the way that we understand that letter, but they also convince clients a lot or put a lot of effort in that. And I also know that they're working on very sustainable buildings. So I don't think actually to talk about that letter more makes much sense. But if we talk about the role of the architect, I think at least a certain amount of architects should step outside and talk to everyone, try just doing that work of convincing people that something has to change. And as soon as we're a critical, or that's one part, and as soon as there is a critical mass, something will start to change. And within our role as a classical role, as the architect, we should, of course, work together with specialists to kind of find that field. And I think that's what he says also, that we shouldn't try to be specialists of that, but work together with everyone who we need. And so there's two things that you should, within your role, you should do as much as possible. You should convince people. And then maybe sometimes you have to step outside of your role and try to do more. And maybe one example here is we usually in Switzerland, you have a competition that's going on and you enter a design proposal and they choose someone. And what we could do with our last project in our office, Stereo Architecture, for example, was that we could apply with a housing corporation for a certain lot where they could get it with a certain concept application. And so we were very much earlier in the process involved in that building being happening, and we were talking to these corporations, and with them we made an application which already kind of has all these topics within it and try to be environmental friendly. And then once it starts, even if someone else is the architect, a lot is accomplished more than what you could do if a client comes to you and says, I want that and that and that, make a nice design. So I think we should step outside the role if we can, and if we can't, we should do as much as we can within our role.
And I will extend a little bit on that. For me, it's also how we see or how we define our role. Beforehand, we are all human beings. Mm-hmm. So, before thinking of I'm an architect, I'm a material scientist, and so on, we are all a human being. Yeah. So as a human being, what can you do to contribute to the climate crisis? And then you try to do that to delimit as a human being, and then you put your profession into it. Mm-hmm. The more, because when you start stacking all these little things, that's where you start making an impact. Because as a human being, you have certain boundaries. As a professional architect, you have also certain boundaries. Mm-hmm. And that, for me, that's how I am approaching working with Oksara. As a human, what do we want? What do we want to achieve? Mm. And then as a material scientist, what is available, tools available around me to make this possible as well? So, yeah, and to come back to your first question, which was toward the city, and so I think at some point policy follow the people. Mm-hmm. If the people are ready to change, I'm sure policy will change as well. Mm-hmm. So we need all together to start having this urgency, to put it like this, of change or building more sustainably, and therefore we'll have architects who will follow, who will be convince much easier the landlord or the owners, and also trickle down to the construction company and so on. And another point that I want to add here is what is currently done, BIM, Building Information Modeling, which is a tool that
help a construction company and architect to work together during the building phase. And this is not shared also with the landlord or the owner, for instance. Whereas if he's also involved from the beginning as well, we can see also a shift in that.
Yes, I would like to take up that statement of yours about sort of the different maybe radiuses that we have as humans, as private people maybe, and then as professionals. I know so many architects who have gone vegan, who don't fly, who have electric cars and in their private lives, and still they continue to build conventionally mostly. And this is really such an interesting question. How and when do we decide to, increase our potential levers, right? If the building industry has such a major impact, we are privileged to be in professions which can actually make a difference. And in that sense, I'm not sure if Herzog's letter is simply defensive or also annoying in a way, right? And well, yeah, I say that wohlwollend, but of course I think all architects discussed about this and were a little bit, somewhere between shaking their heads and laughing. And we find ourselves in a situation, ironically, where architects are not spearheading a development or spearheading a situation, but actually the ones kind of dragging their feet, where there's knowledge that is being built up. There's people like you. There is technologies available. There's even building regulations that require more than we are actually willing to do as architects, and that puts us to shame, I think, as a profession.
And I also would like to add, I mean, if we talk about this game that we're playing, and within this game are certain rules, and, as we said, 2030, there's an urgency. We can't wait for the game to change. We can't wait another 5 years, and maybe, luckily, we got some better rules which make us a little more environmental friendly. But we also have to tackle it, and we also have to start doing whatever we can right now. We can't just wait for the game to change and then fulfill those problems, And we're right now, our sector is a huge part of the problem of this climate crisis, and but as you said, we have the potential to become a solution of it, or to become part of the solution of it. And I think this should be a joyful kind of task. It could be like, until now it was like that. We know it's a problem, and now let's find out how to do it better, and then use your whole creativity to make something out of it. And I don't know what needs to happen until this is the case, but we're working on it, every one of us. Right?
Yeah, that's actually a very good point. And since I'm also seeing that even our 15 extra minutes are also starting to run out, maybe just to end with or to kind of build off of your final comment here for a final question round, a lightning question round, I guess. Of course, building coalitions, kind of convincing, building up empathy, these are all very long-term work that, of course, is very important, that needs to continue, right? And also, things like, let's say, Architects Declare, or kind of work that kind of, commitments to a certain building, building more sustainably. These are also very important. But I think, what are some short-term actionable things that we can even implement tomorrow? Perhaps in each of your fields, let's say. Maybe just a lightning round, kind of just each one of you, maybe one thing that you might suggest, what can professionals in your field, implement tomorrow in order to start making a difference tomorrow?
One thing. Can I say three? No, this is the postcards that we have. We want people to take them and from day one start making an impact in a positive direction using those tools. Maybe three important ones that I would like to highlight is using existing structures for now, because we have at the moment not the tools to build huge buildings carbon free, and we have it's this urgency that we have these emissions down very soon. And so whenever we can reuse existing structures instead of tearing them down and rebuilding something new, I think that's one of the biggest levers right now. And we need to convince people that this is one of the solutions. Then talk about sufficiency. It's always better not to build in sense of a climate crisis. So just build what's necessary and where it is necessary. And the third one is maybe, which is the fastest impact very quickly, is just building materials. If you have to build, that you take buildings which are less environmental harmful, like wood, for example, which is, of course you have these new materials which are interesting and risk, but, building in wood is not really a risk. You can use it and it's better for the environment than other materials.
Thank you. Yanni?
Yeah, I think you said almost everything.
Sorry.
No, from our perspective, what we could do is really how do we share the information in terms of what we can do with the material. It's we are engaged with one of the real estate companies in Switzerland here. We are they often just talk to the architect, and when the architect reach out to us, we are like, no, we need to talk to him so that he understands what he's getting into. Not it's really bad things, but really to inform him that the stage of development we are in, and also to understand what are the advantage and disadvantage of the solution. Because if the architect came to us and say, I want to build a prime tower, we are not there yet. So we are trying to do little steps, which are if needed to build, is our technology the right one? And we have said no to people who want to build with our technology, and we are no, it cannot fit because the constraint you are asking is huge. We cannot provide this to you. So we also, as an actor, need to be responsible and say, we can do this, we cannot do this. And really, it's sometimes really difficult to say that. If you are not, if your technology cannot solve the problem, just say cannot. And then maybe another technology will do better. But not because you want to sell yours, that you say, okay, I'm providing it. For concrete. If you cannot make a concrete CO2 free, don't say, yeah, my concrete is CO2 free. So just by compensating. It's really, really, things that need to be perceived, or openly discussed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, since you both already said some really good, maybe good points, maybe widely covering what could be said, I'm going to point out maybe one little thing, and that is because we have this unique possibility of acquiring jobs in Switzerland through competitions. I think competitions could also be a very easy sort of quick fix to think about how are, competitions published, what do they require, and what do the juries look like. This could be an easy and quick fix. But apart from that, the postcards, I think those are a really good example. You picked content from the postcards, sort of the most impactful points, but I think the postcards themselves, the example that you had originally from this, I don't know what it was, psychology institute, some psychology institute. So basically a psychological trick, a postcard that shows you that there are things that you can do and that they have different impacts, and they break down, the possibilities into sort of easy steps. There's also this publication Ausgepufft that was edited by Anders Herzog, Hochparterre, which I think does a similar thing as your postcards. And I think that is also a quick fix, not so much for the planners to plan according to, but for the planners to just feel that what they do matters and that it is not, maybe I do it, maybe I don't, it doesn't make a difference, but that it actually can make a difference and will make a difference what we do, especially if all of us do it. I think that's very important, this psychological aspect as well, to get people on board.
Well, thank you all for your thoughts, and I think that's a good kind of, with these action items. I think that's a good way to perhaps kind of bring this, well, at least this limited discussion to a close and open it up to let's say, a longer, continuous discussion. I'd like to thank Open House Zurich and Open House Basel for the invitation and for the initiative of organizing this event. I'd like to thank our audience, our physical as well as digital audience, for tuning in and hopefully also discussing in the comments. And finally, I'd like to thank each of our guests, so Annika, Nyanli, Claudio, and Stefan, for their insights and expertise. So I hope this was an interesting event for you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we say goodbye from Basel and from Zurich, and stay tuned when we move on to Monterrey in Mexico. Bye.